There is one constant in game design, one element that can be found in any genre, any era, and any platform. And that element is risk and reward. At its core, every game is a negotiation between what the player is willing to put on the line and what they hope to gain in return. Every game, whether it's an open-world RPG or a minimalist puzzle game, relies on this dynamic to keep players hooked. And as a designer, understanding how to use it effectively can truly elevate your game. So let's break it down and learn how to use risk and reward properly, in a way that keeps players hooked without feeling unfair. The first step is understanding the player's perspective. Players don't like risks for the sake of risks. They like choices, and every choice in your game should carry some level of consequence. It's the difference between feeling like a hero, navigating treacherous waters, or just a passenger being dragged along. When designing risks, ask yourself, what is the player risking? Is it time, resources, progress, or even their sense of control? And most importantly, how aware is the player of the stakes? Can they anticipate the danger, or is it hidden behind the corner? It's really important to equilibrate these two elements. For example, let's say that you're designing a zombie game, and to reach the next safe area, players can choose between going through the zombies, fighting against them, or instead they can go through an alternate route that combines stealth and parkour. If they choose the second one, which is seemingly safer as long as they don't mess up, and suddenly you place a zombie around the corner that instantly kills the player, you're punishing the player even though they had no way of knowing this option was the wrong one, so they weren't aware of the stakes. Players need enough information to make informed choices, or they will feel punished for something beyond their control, which is not how we want them to feel. You want players to always feel in control. Keeping those two questions in mind while designing any element is crucial, and it will instantly elevate your game design. That doesn't mean that every single choice should be rewarded though. Sometimes punishing the player can be good, or at least necessary. Not every choice is a good choice after all. For example, if the player decides to risk their health for a chance to get a reward, that reward may not always be worth it. In Slay the Spire, you're often asked to sacrifice part of your health for a chance of getting a relic in exchange. You don't really know if that relic will be a good one or a bad one, but you know how much health you will be losing, and you will always know your chances of getting that reward. If instead it just said, lose health for a chance of getting that reward, you're not giving enough information for this to feel like a fair trade, no matter the outcome. But sometimes you don't need to be 100% transparent with players, because let's face it, people can be pretty dumb. For example, if a player sees that they have a 99% chance of getting a reward and only a 1% chance of getting punished, the chances don't really matter. If they end up with the punishment, they will always feel betrayed, because in our mind, a 1% chance is so small that it just cannot happen. Instead, even if those are the actual chances, maybe saying something like, the chance of punishment is at 10% could be better. That way, their chances of getting a good outcome are higher than they expect, making them feel even more lucky. And even if they are really unlucky and receive a punishment, they will think that they are part of the 10% who were punished, rather than the 1%, making the risk feel higher and the outcome more fair. So don't be afraid to tweak the numbers slightly if that makes the experience more enjoyable for the player, because sometimes ignorance is bliss. But don't be a dick. Always tweak the numbers in favor of the player, not against them. The goal is not to frustrate them, it's to keep the experience fun and fair. And now that we have covered the risks, let's talk about designing rewards. Just like risks, when designing rewards, you should always ask yourself a few questions. First of all, does the reward feel meaningful? Players need to feel like the reward matters, whether it's in the form of progression, story impact, or whatever applies to your specific game. If a reward is too small or doesn't match the player's expectations, it can feel like a letdown, no matter how nice it looks on paper. If the player collects 100 wood in an hour, and then they build a machine that the player can control to produce 50 wood per hour, that reward is useless, because the player can just keep chopping wood for a reward of 100 per hour. If instead that machine produces wood even when the player isn't controlling it, or it produces twice as much, then the investment to build it, both in terms of time and resources, will feel worth it. Another thing to consider is whether the reward creates a sense of progression or achievement. Rewards that feel like a step forward in the player's journey keep them engaged and motivated. Players want to feel like they are moving forward towards something greater. If the reward is simply a small bonus, or doesn't move the player forward in a meaningful way, it can feel like a waste of time. For example, in a progression-based game, giving the player a trivial item after a difficult task will make them question the effort they put in. However, if the reward unlocks new abilities, areas, or challenges, it reinforces the idea that their actions are leading to growth. And lastly, does the reward reinforce player agency or choice? Rewards should make players feel like their decisions matter. When players are allowed to choose how to tackle challenges, the rewards should reflect the freedom that they had in deciding the approach. For instance, in a game with multiple paths or strategies, offering rewards that cater to different playstyles, like a powerful weapon for a combat-focused player or a utility item for those who prefer stealth, reinforces the feeling that the player's choice shaped in some way their experience. This gives them a sense of ownership and control over the outcome, which is extremely satisfying. For example, in a game, if you're in the middle of a dialogue and you have the option to be rude or nice, but the outcome is the same, then what's the purpose of even giving an option in the first place? In fact, why even show a dialogue? If players have no agency, then just show a cinematic or an animation or something like that. And if the player can choose between being rude or nice, the outcome should reflect that in some way. If you're rude towards an NPC, they may raise the price at which they sell items. Or maybe they will refuse to help in a mission. That depends on your game and the impact that you want to create, but there has to be something. But it doesn't matter how well you understand risk and reward. Balancing is always tricky, and that's where testing comes into place. Something that feels fair for you as a designer or developer might feel overwhelming or underwhelming to players. And that's why you need to watch how players react to different risks. For example, do they avoid them entirely? If so, the reward might not be worth it, or the risk might feel too unfair. Also, experiment with different types of rewards. Sometimes players value emotional payoff, like a story reveal, more than a material one. And then just keep tweaking until every risk feels meaningful and every reward feels earned. And once you've mastered the basics, you can start layering risks to create deeper, more engaging systems. You can combine short-term and long-term risks. You can also add trade-offs. Do you spend limited resources to make a risky boss fight easier? Or do you save them for the next area, even though you may die now? And lastly, you should use uncertainty. Not every risk needs a guaranteed outcome. A treasure chest could hold a legendary weapon, or it could be a mimic. The key is to make the odds clear enough that the players feel like they made a choice, not a gamble. As a designer or developer, your job is not to throw risks at players. It's to craft an experience where every risk feels like an opportunity and every reward feels like a victory. So next time you sit down to design, ask yourself, what's the risk and what's the reward? Because when you get that balance right, the rest of the game will follow. And that's all for now. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, and you can check this video next. See ya!